From my own experience. Henry's been farming for nearly 20 years now, feeding a lot of people really good food. And then I started to look at the UN reports. There's been a number of recent reports. Again, I'd be happy to share them with you. One of them says, agriculture should be fundamentally redirected toward modes of production that are more environmentally sustainable and socially just. And it's talking largely about places like Africa, Latin America, Asia. And I think maybe, you know what, I'm going to show you a few more slides, but this is one of the last things I'm going to close with. This is a quote from Sandra Steingraber, another Central Illinois person who now lives in New York, in her recently new edition of her book, Living Downstream. She says, agriculture is 6,000 years old. For 5,940 of those years, it was practiced organically. But 60 years, 2 generations, is still a long time in human terms. It's long enough for us as a culture to have lost entire skill sets. It's long enough for the barns that once held fertilizer-providing animals to collapse. It's long enough for a country's entire fleet of hay balers to rust out, for local canneries to close up shop, and for knowledge about the weed-controlling abilities of sheep to slip away. It's long enough that the very idea of using chemicals linked to cancer to grow fruits and vegetables that we eat to prevent cancer no longer seems as bizarre as it might have to our ancestors. And so I'm going to kind of skip through here, but what I do want to actually, just a couple things, is this slide is a picture of a garden in a very poor neighborhood in Chicago. And I actually did a story about these folks. It's the Little Village neighborhood, a very densely populated, very poor, mostly Mexican-American community in Chicago, also very polluted with coal-fired power plants nearby and a lot of other problems. And I wrote about this in the recent edition of Edible Chicago, which you can pick up outside after. And often we're accused of being elitist, you know, we're the arugula-munching, you know, elite. But these folks decided to take things in their own hands because they don't have a lot of money, and also luckily because a lot of them come from rural areas of Mexico, they know how to grow stuff. And so they started putting in gardens in their churches, church areas, around their churches, around their schools, and in their backyards. And they're producing an amazing amount of fresh fruits and vegetables for very little money, helping them both economically and health-wise. In the article I wrote, I kind of got some statistics on Hispanic population, obesity, diabetes, the usual, you know, modern health issues that we all seem to be subject to. And they're trying to counteract that by taking matters into their own hands. And I think it's a great example of something that's not elitist. It's very democratic and bottom-up decision. And on the other hand, you know, they're getting better health and they're getting it for a lower price. So I think that if we don't want the futility syndrome, which I have seen actually in a lot of students, well-informed futility syndrome, even in high school students that I talk to, the only antidote, the only cure, I think, for that sense of futility, you know, the world's going to hell, is action. And this kind of action that we can each take in our own lives, in our own backyards, in our own neighborhoods, in our own communities, in our own classrooms. And I don't mean necessarily planting something, although I think physically, literally, planting is a good thing, but also planting seeds, planting the ideas. When the next time somebody says, feed the world, say, are we? And is this the best way to feed the world? So, just a few pictures of some other countries. I had one of my amazing eating experiences in Eritrea, right after the war with Ethiopia. So there's burnt out tanks to the right of me, and there's, you know, just disastrous things to the left of me. And I had this most amazing frittata. And it was the most amazing frittata I'd ever had. It really rivaled the egg at Bradbury's. And it was because those chickens were running around outside, and they had just laid some eggs. And then they had just got some little herbs that were growing outside and put it on top. And I had the most amazing food that I couldn't get where I was living in New York City at the time. So when I came back to Illinois, and I decided that we could have just as good food as they have in Eritrea, thank you, I decided we had to take action. We had to vote with our forks for what food system we want to support. Every time we spend $1, we can either be supporting some large multinational corporations that are destroying our natural resources, or we can be helping some of our local people who are preserving and enhancing our natural resources. And then very briefly, I'm just going to flip through these. These are some of the good things that happen. When you make a choice to either grow your own food or buy good food from somebody in your own community, and you know how they're raising that food, then you have concentric circles of good that, as far as I'm concerned, there's no end to the concentric circles of good. But the good starts in a very selfish way. It starts with taste. When you eat something that's really good, like I had the other morning, or when you have a fresh tomato from your own garden, you know, you get happy. I mean, your mouth is just like, it's just little fireworks are going off. It tastes so good. So that's a very selfish thing, right? It's good. You're having a pleasurable moment, and why not? And then from there you get good nutrition. And there are food scientists, there's quite a lot of literature that we've looked into, that if it tastes good, it is good for you. It's not what the FDA says, that one carrot has X units of vitamin A and one tomato has X units of vitamin C. It's actually, again, not true. That when something tastes good, it is good for you, and they've shown carrots that have 40 times the amount of vitamin A as another carrot. Not just double or triple, but 40 times. And so when you eat something that tastes good, you're getting good nutrition, and that's something we could all use more of. It's good for kids, not only in nutrition, but if you're having good food that doesn't have, say, organophosphate pesticides on it, which are linked now to various problems, mostly attention deficit. It's good for kids. It's also good for them to know that food comes from nature, from the outdoors. It's good for soil. I can't show all the biota of the soil, but I showed an earthworm. And there, again, there's some data, lots of data that show that chemical fields are pretty much devoid of life, and all of the intensely delicate and interlaced ecosystem of the soil, it's just destroyed. It's like, you know, I don't know, raped and pillaged. It's gone. It's good for water, and again, I could go into this a lot more, but there's, you know, again, most of our farm fields in Illinois are drained by tiles, which is a direct delivery system of all those pollutants into our groundwater, and a third of our wells are polluted with agricultural chemicals. Good for biodiversity, like I talked about the apples and about all the other things. We're losing both crop biodiversity and natural biodiversity, but ecological farming can bring that back. Here's just a few of Henry's amazing tomatoes. He's growing close to 100 kinds of tomatoes. But I had to put this up because I love the orange-fleshed purple smudge tomato, just for its name. It's good for farm families. People can actually make a living with farming all around the world instead of having to go work in a factory or something. That was one of my neighbor farm families in the left who have 11 kids, and they actually used to have to do all kinds of bricklaying and concrete work and long-distance truck driving until they went organic, and they are now feeding their family of 11 and feeding a lot of other people as well, making a living. It's good for social interaction. You guys are sociologists, so you probably know the study I read where it said that when you go to the store, you have one conversation, but when you go to the farmer's market, you have, I forget, you have like a dozen conversations. And the one conversation you have in the grocery store, you know what it is? Somebody did it, I heard it, paper or plastic, which is not a very meaningful conversation. It's good for rural economies. Again, a lot of data coming up on this, that our agriculture as it's currently practiced with large-scale corn and soybean agriculture is very extractive. It's just like strip mining. It's actually really like strip mining. And it's for short-term gain, and money is going away to other major corporations, not staying in our community. That's also true around the world. And again, this could be a whole talk in itself that I've been interested in lately with everything that's happened in Tunisia, with the fruit cellar, and with Egypt. And people not having their own sources of food is a very dangerous situation to be in globally, not to mention personally. So there's a whole series of these beautiful posters from World War II that encourage people to grow their own, and I think maybe we are getting back to that at this point. So basically, to sum up here, we need you. I need every single one of you to wrap yourself in the American flag and, and to support sustainable farmers in your own communities for all those reasons. And I don't care if you're more interested in soil, or you're more interested in taste, or you're more interested in economic angles. There's so many reasons to do it, and they're all good reasons. And I think I just had one last concluding thought, which is because of the tour I went on yesterday, thank you for my tour guides, This kind of agriculture is democratic. It's not autocratic, it's not plutocratic, it's democratic from the people. And I think it's happening in the spaces of our democracy, and I don't mean at the Capitol, although that is a good place for action to happen too, but unfortunately money rules our elected officials, and unless some of you are very wealthy, where our spaces of democracy are around the water cooler at work, in your classroom if you're teaching, it's at your church, it's at your neighborhood potluck, it's in the newspapers. People do still read, especially the letters to the editor. So I would encourage all of you to fight the futility syndrome and to do whatever it is that you do best. Grow something in your backyard, teach your students, question those received wisdoms like feed the world, and then get together and enjoy some food with your friends. Thank you. And, sorry, that was my, I do have a slide I wanted to put in. All my contact info if you want to get in touch. And Joan, do we have time for questions or not?
We're running out of time, so what we'll do, Tara out in the lobby area, you can talk to her and some materials, and then also get some snacks for us.
Thank you.
Thank you all.